What a new day! So, this video has finally arrived. I've been hinting at this video for a while now, and I'm finally doing it. In about 2022, I saw a TED Talk by Dr. Alexandra Sachs, and she referenced her book with Dr. Birndorf. So this is the book, What No One Tells You. The byline is A Guide to Your Emotions from Pregnancy to Motherhood. Made popular the new term matrescence. It's not a new term, and we'll get into that. But I want to review this book because I really enjoyed this book. I'm very excited that it's on the market and it's available. I have no idea its popularity currently, but I really want to make sure that it gets known. This book is much less about the process of birth. It's written by two psychiatrists. So this is about the emotional and social experience of the perinatal period. This is not a paid endorsement. I bought the book myself. Nobody associated with the book approached me about this. I saw the video. I had money at the time to be able to buy the book and dove right into it. I'm going to include in the description down below the link to that TED Talk that I saw, as well as a way to get a hold of this book for yourself. I found it on an online bookseller. I'm sure there's lots of other ways to get a hold of the book, including more brick and mortar stores, especially like your independent bookseller would be a great resource for that. So let's get into this review. I'm kind of frustrated that this is my second attempt. I did well over 30 minutes of footage and then found out that the recording did not save. And I'm so disgusted still. Recorded it yesterday and had to give myself some space because the recording was not going to go well. I wasn't going to be able to connect with this topic without constantly thinking about how that didn't save. And I can't edit something that doesn't exist. This book, I'm going to be reading off some of my notes, so if you'll bear with me. But the book focuses on the first 22 months of pregnancy and beyond, and 22 months is like fabulous. I'll get into some more about how the postpartum period really needs to be focused on more, because not only is there so much more, the last chapter 6 is about the first year of motherhood. We really need to consider what this major life change, there's kind of this assumption that the prenatal period is enough of an adjustment period to dive right into motherhood immediately after, and that's just absolutely not realistic at all. Pregnancy just prepares a person for labor. That's all it does. I mean, to some extent, it prepares some for the sleeplessness of early postpartum and life with a newborn, but it does not prepare for parenthood, for sure. So, this book definitely shines a light on this whole experience. It is very validating on a wide range of experiences. It breaks through fantasies and brings everything down to earth. It does not cover medical events, except like the common and sometimes not so common emotional, mental, and social reactions to medical events. Alexandra Sachs and Catherine Birndorf are both psychiatrists with a specialty in the field of matrescence, which is it's what also could be considered the transition to motherhood. In the 1970s, an anthropologist by the name of Dana Raphael came up with this term of the transition to motherhood. I'll get into it in another video coming soon about how this is different from my term of the transition phase of pregnancy. For me, if I'm really transparent about my filter or my experience or my approach to this topic, is that I've been a doula since the 90s, so that means over 30 years since I was first trained, and have been soaked in the subject of perinatal health because of that, spending some time studying midwifery even. And then now, as you all know, those that have followed me since the beginning or watched from the beginning videos, that I just came out of school for human development, family science, getting into family theory and how families function and dysfunction, but also a certificate in infant mental health. So how mental health affects us from infancy and even from the prenatal period. The themes of this book are just basically about the human experience during the perinatal period. They definitely addressed how expectations about parenthood can be detrimental and how to address that. They talked about the need for personal power, how to develop that, and finding and creating and using support, using effective communication to get needs met and problems solved, and collaborating with providers, which I will make a note right now. We hire our providers. We are not subject to them, they're subject to us. We hire them, we pay them. When we meet a new provider, we're interviewing them. It is really okay to change your provider at any time during your care. So there's that, talking about personal power. They address a wide variety of circumstances, including single parenthood, parenthood without support, the challenge of changing body image, and the dysfunction of that when that happens, fertility and pregnancy loss, and I love that they addressed all of this stuff. So some points that I'm really glad that they touched on. This quote on page 29, one of the biggest lessons of pregnancy is the need to accept what you can and can't control. Absolutely true. Pregnancy is a great way to prepare for labor. Labor is probably the second biggest surrender in a person's life, second only to death itself, the ultimate surrender. Another point they made was give yourself a break. It is probably the biggest life change there is. It's bigger than getting married. It's more life-changing than moving in with somebody. This is not an equal relationship. This is being responsible for and caring for a dependent individual. So it is a big demand on the psyche at the least. And that's not even including sleepless nights. So give yourself a break. It is a lot of work. It is very intense work. Next point is that new parenthood is not all blissful. Bliss is a myth that's created by expectation and fueled by shame. Human life itself cannot be sustained on gratitude 24/7. It just can't. That's not how life works. And even more so in parenthood, when there's such a demand for selflessness, finding bliss can be really difficult at times. Which leads into my next point about some great things that they talked about. Was mental health really is needed throughout the entire perinatal experience. Pregnancy alone much less new parenthood, will bring up old memories, old traumas, will stimulate some difficult things that need to get worked on and talked through and processed and all of that. And for some people, that will take more than just a discussion with a family member or some kind of loved one. So, and like I said before, since this is one of the biggest, probably the biggest life change, life altering experiences for people, mental health support is highly valuable. Parenthood is not limited to binary nuclear families. There's plenty of grandparents that are raising families. So the same can be true about the initial family that creates that baby. Emotional and mental experience of the perinatal period is widely varied. If you think about it, every individual on the planet, the perinatal period is not a synthesized universal. There might be markers that are very similar, but that does not mean that the whole experience is going to be just like your neighbor or your sister or whoever else. So, again, give yourself a break. Next point is they gave some great examples. I mean, psychiatrists, so of course they're going to have great stories. Great examples of how to handle various difficult conversations and difficult situations. Ideas about words to use and approaches to have and ways to support those things. Just wealth of information. It was great. Next is reproduction can potentially affect every area of your life. Quite frankly, I believe it affects it does, not just potentially, affect every area of your life. So just be prepared for that. Like I said, it's completely life altering and should not be minimized or disregarded. That change can be very challenging, and for some people, many people, can even be negative. I don't want to relegate this to the chosen few that struggle with it. It's a struggle for everyone. It is a struggle for everyone. It's a very challenging change in life. And one of my favorite hot topics is they validated that media shapes our reality. What we take in social media and news and movies and all sorts of things can shape our perspective of reality. Okay, some points I disagree with. I disagreed with almost the entire birth section because their perspective was based on medicalized hospital obstetric birth. And not only from my perspective as a doula, who has been trained on natural physiologic birth, which very rarely happens in hospitals, but even the science has shown how dysfunctional hospital birth is. So there's that. Well, my next point is that while hospital birth, currently hospital birth in the United States is about 95% of all births, it is not the only option for anyone, for almost anyone. There are high risk births that, yes, they need to be in a hospital with an OB. That's what obstetrics is for, is handling emergencies and high risk. That's what they should be used for. But since the majority of births are not that way, another thing I have to disagree with, they diffused the experience of fear, which is necessary in the understanding of psychiatry and mental health in general. But fear has a big impact on labor and definitely can during pregnancy. It absolutely has an impact on perinatal outcomes because of what Dr. Dick Reed discovered in the 50s and wrote about in Childbirth Without Fear, that fear leads to tension, which leads to pain. That leads to the necessity for pain relief. And all medicines have side effects, and so the cascade of complications begins, and that's a topic for another time. Fear, at the least, increases cortisol, and cortisol competes with labor hormones. So there's that. Next, out of hospital statistics show it is not more life or death than hospital birth. Something that I disagreed with is childbirth is not a common conversation, and it needs to be. It used to be. While our understanding and our knowledge of childbirth has matured since like the early 1900s, it was a common conversation, especially among those that give birth. Birth was a regular discussion. There is some discussion of it now, but it's definitely not a common discussion, especially the knowledge of it. There's discussion, and there's war stories and things like that, but it's not the common conversation that it needs to be, to the point of sharing knowledge and wisdom and information. Birth classes need to be independent from the birthplace. Just really. A birth class that's given by an OB office or hospital is going to be birth education about hospital birth experience. It's not education about the birth process, and especially what's normal. You're basically being taught what's going to happen to you at the hospital and indoctrinate how to comply with that, is basically what those education classes are. An independent birth class is going to teach you about the physiology of birth, the function of birth, what helps, what makes it more difficult,